We're getting married. No need for you anymore, old lady. One day, my husband, who is a company president, came with his secretary to propose a divorce. The secretary stood by him, mocking and looking down on me. I have been married to him for 25 years. Just as we have grown the company together over these years, this betrayal comes. Moreover, the mistress is the secretary who always looked down on me. I'm not the kind to stay silent after being ridiculed like this. Fine. I'll give you a divorce. In return, I demanded a substantial amount of property division. The two of them were pleased with my words. Soon after, the divorce was finalized, and I decided to leave the company. Sometime later, the two had a grand wedding overseas. Despite being looked down upon by the employees, they didn't care. However, the situation changed about a month after the wedding. I was living a quiet life after quitting my job when I received a call from the secretary. What's the meaning of this? You tricked me. She shouted angrily as soon as I answered. According to her, her husband's attitude had changed since before their marriage. I smirked, imagining such a scenario. Then I decided to reveal another side of my husband to her. I am Kathy, a 45-year-old woman. I usually work at the company run by my husband. Although I'm the president's wife, it's a small company, so I mostly do administrative work. The company can't operate without the active involvement of every employee. The workplace atmosphere isn't bad, and I think it's quite homey. Employees don't hesitate to talk to me, the president's wife. And they feel comfortable consulting me. The company management was going fairly well. We have a son, Michael, who turns 25 this year. After graduating from college, he was working for another company. But he recently joined our company. It's uncertain what will happen to this company in the future, but if Michael is to take over, I thought it would be better for him to gain experience elsewhere first. So even after joining our company, he's treated like any other new employee. I've told his colleagues to guide him strictly if there is anything he should learn. His colleagues, knowing my serious nature, don't over-accommodate and properly train Michael. Although I was busy every day, both the work and company management were going smoothly. I met Richard, my husband, just after I started college. From a rural area, I was able to go to a university in Boston because I could get good grades. However, without any acquaintances, I was bewildered by life, about which I didn't know anything at all. Not being fashionable, I felt out of place among my peers. Because of this, I didn't make any friends, didn't join any clubs, and just went back and forth between home and lectures. Eventually, I was impressed by the large number of books in the university library. And as a book lover, I spent most of my time there, further isolating myself. One day, while reading a book in the library between lectures, someone spoke to me. You're always reading, aren't you? A gentle-looking young man with glasses was smiling at me. I was so surprised that I couldn't speak. Apart from talking to professors and librarians, I didn't have anyone else to talk to. It might have been the first time I was approached by another student. Well, yeah. I like books. He asked if he could sit next to me, and he did that. Flustered, I faced my book, but I couldn't absorb the content at all. Glancing to the side, I noticed he was also reading a book. I hadn't noticed because of the glasses, but he had long lashes and beautiful eyes. When I stared at him without realizing it, he noticed my gaze and turned to me. Is something wrong? Our eyes met. Stammering, I asked him why he had approached me. Blushing, he replied, I've always noticed you because you're so beautiful. That was the start of our relationship. Richard was in the same year as me, studying engineering. While talking, I discovered we were from neighboring hometowns. We hit it off talking about our hometowns, and since I was naturally talkative, I was able to chat freely for the first time in a while. We met almost daily at the library, and after a while, he asked me out on a date. And confessed on the way home. I worried if I was good enough. Looking around, there were many fashionable and cute female students. When I'm with you, Kathy, I can be myself. Sensing how I felt, he took my hand and pulled me close. Though he was usually gentle and calm, I could feel his masculine strength. It didn't feel bad, and I naturally embraced him. I couldn't put it into words, but that was my best response, and Richard accepted it. By the time we were sophomores, we had started living together without telling our parents. Since dating Richard, my self-esteem had improved. And I started a part-time job and joined a club I had been interested in, becoming more active. I also made some female friends. I thought, if I hadn't met Richard, none of this would have happened. However, just when I was enjoying my ideal college life, it abruptly came to an end due to an unexpected event. Richard and I had conceived a child. If things continued, I would give birth around the summer of my junior year. Even if I could get through the first semester, taking a break for childbirth and childcare would be inevitable. Although my parents were paying my tuition, they didn't have much to spare. And repeating a year was not an option. My father was furious. My mother was also angry, but the thought of an abortion was not comforting either. My father threatened to disown me if I had the child. He thought it wouldn't be too late after graduating from college, then starting working. I couldn't deny that. My parents had struggled with their education. And they were doing their utmost to support me so I wouldn't have to go through the same. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to terminate Richard's child, so after discussing it with him, we decided to have the baby, even if it meant being disowned. Richard's family was also struggling, so the two of us dropped out of college. Afterward, we registered our marriage, and Richard worked to barely manage until the birth. From then on, it was a life of saving, truly living in poverty. Of course, we couldn't rely on our parents, so we had to manage on our own. Driven by necessity, Richard started a business, but it wasn't smooth sailing. In between childcare, I handled the administrative tasks I could. And we managed to earn just enough to get by. As we struggled together, work gradually increased, and so did the revenue. Eventually, we were able to hire employees, expand, and the company grew. While working desperately, Michael also grew up, and before we knew it, 25 years had passed since our marriage. Still, Richard and I are only 45 years old. There are many aspects of the work we can delegate to employees. So we want to spend peaceful times traveling together. I thought, we didn't even have a wedding or a honeymoon. There are many things we couldn't do, but now we have enough money to enjoy the present. Meanwhile, although I was disowned by my family, I still occasionally contact my mother. My father won't back down once he's said something. But it seems he's feeling lonely as he gets older. In fact, I have been regularly sending photos of Michael to my parents' house since he was born. Apparently, my father secretly looks forward to them. It might be time to take Michael to see them. Maybe now, my father might forgive me. Yet, I say this but can't make time due to work. Recently, as we've gotten older, Richard's capabilities have also begun to wane. He forgets meetings with business partners and paperwork errors have become more frequent. Sorry. Despite my reminders, it's like a waste of time. He rarely goes fishing, which he used to love, and he's increasingly worried about work. At times, he is unduly angry with employees. It's more scolding than reminding, and I find myself having to calm things down more often. Is this what aging is like? I thought, well, me too. I as well as Richard feel that decision-making speed has declined compared to the past. I understand the frustration of not being able to do things like before. That's why I want Michael to be able to take over the work, but it will probably take another 5 years. We'll have to hold on until then. However, one day, Richard suddenly said he would make one of the new employees his secretary. He decided without consulting me, which was surprising. What's going on, suddenly? When I asked him alone, Richard said, "Won't Michael need someone when he takes over? You helped me when I needed some help." Indeed, I am handling the duties of the president's secretary. It makes sense to think about what will happen when that role is vacant. And I can understand Richard's point. Shouldn't it be someone else then? An experienced employee who knows various things would be better. Richard gave a non-committal reply. Oh, what was it? I thought, what's going on? Well, it's that. It would be better to have someone who can work for a long time learn it. She's also knowledgeable about computer operations. I was skeptical, but I agreed with my husband's response. Indeed, the new employee Richard was pushing, Stacy, is proficient in computers and was hired to promote digital transformation of our work. It makes sense for her to support Michael. But that girl. However, there is one thing I don't like. It's Stacy's attitude. She acts nice in front of my husband and other employees, but is arrogant in front of me. I don't understand why she treats me this way. Maybe it's because I lack knowledge in IT, and sometimes my questions during work are off the mark. Even so, regardless of my position as the president's wife, the lack of respect is too much. Well, let's try using her first. If it doesn't work, we can always change her placement. Perhaps due to my persistence, Richard started to show irritation. I thought, maybe it's unseemly to say more. Indeed, we should try her out first. Agreeing with Richard's opinion seemed to refresh his mood, and he smiled. Then Stacy was appointed as the president's secretary. Her performance wasn't bad, and she managed to organize operations that had been inefficient. Some employees struggled to keep up with the digital transformation. But Stacy created manuals, and the experienced employees did their best despite difficulties. I thought, though her attitude is problematic, if this improves our company's operational efficiency, it might be okay. I recognized Stacy's work, but her attitude still bothered me. As I am unfamiliar with IT-related matters, whenever I ask questions or confirm something, she often responds with a snide remark. I wish you'd learn this quicker. Her blatant attitude was irritating. However, I couldn't afford to become emotional because of my position. After all, she is kind to other employees when teaching them. She must also be under various pressures in her role. Her attitude towards me might be a sign that she can show her true self. I tried to interpret it as positively as possible. Yet, Stacy's attitude escalated. She made sarcastic remarks in front of other employees and excluded me from manuals and explanations. What's this about? When I confronted her about going too far, she said, "You know, just because you're the president's wife doesn't mean you can act that way." It's power harassment, and the other new employees are also put off. Looking around, I saw the gazes of the employees directed at us. Some were whispering to each other. I was taken aback by the atmosphere in the workplace, which I had never felt before. I see. Sorry, Stacy. As you can see, I'm not very good at this. Could you teach me? Only then did she seem satisfied and came forward to explain with a smug look. Can't help it, huh? Just because you're the president's wife doesn't mean you can be careless. I thought, what is this? The frustration and the strange atmosphere in what used to be a homely workplace are bewildering. I never acted haughty just because I was the president's wife. Rather, I'm confident because I worked as part of the team with everyone. But it's true that the culture of the younger generation is different. I painfully realize that the sense of employees as family, as in the old days, doesn't resonate anymore amid work reforms and prioritizing personal time. I thought, have I unwittingly become what they call an old nuisance? Interacting with Stacy, I feel my confidence, built up over time, slowly crumbling. I studied hard and struggled not to be demeaned by Stacy. Then, one day, my efforts were suddenly betrayed. One holiday, as usual, I was at home when Richard said he was going out for a walk. He had often been staying home on his days off recently, so I was a little relieved to see him go out. But when he didn't return for a while, I started to worry, and then Richard came back. Welcome, BA. I hurried to the entrance to greet Richard but stopped, stunned. There was Richard, with Stacy's arm entwined in his. What is this all about? I'm sorry, but this old lady is no longer needed. Right, Richard? Richard nods in agreement. I feel bad for Kathy, who has worked hard for many years. But you know, younger women are preferable. Saying this, he strokes Stacy's head. The age difference is as much as a parent and a child. There's disgust in addition to the anger. The company will be appalled. I wonder what Michael will think. It's fine. I'm the president, and it's my company. He says confidently. Is that so? It'll be tough without me around. What are you talking about? You have a young and capable secretary right here. Stacy laughs smugly. Oh, it doesn't matter. Of course, I'll pay you a severance and property division. It's only fair. I thought, unbelievable. That Stacy, so young, would get involved with such an old man. Richard, too, is smitten with a young woman and getting carried away. The two of them look so foolish in front of me that my anger turns into disdain. So the reason Richard has been eating out so much recently was this. I had thought it was business dinners or something. And he was even charging those meals to the company as entertainment expenses. The amount is significant, but it shows how involved he is. If he's going to be like that, then I might as well divorce him. I'm not the type to stay silent after being ridiculed by Stacy and betrayed by Richard, whom I've been with for so long. Fine, I'll give you a divorce. Stacy is thrilled. Now she's the president's wife. She's boasting about riding in the high life. Lately, supporting Richard, who has been declining, has been increasingly difficult. If I have to keep helping him more and more, it's wise to step back. Besides, I've been thinking about taking it easy soon, so this comes at a good time. I grab a bag and leave the house. As I'm about to leave, Stacy calls out to me from behind. Poor old lady. Have a miserable rest of your life. I have quite a bit of savings, so living in a hotel for a while is no problem. Whether she knows it or not. I leave without saying anything back, not even turning around. I mailed the divorce papers I signed that day back to the house, and the divorce is finalized later on. Richard, as promised, transferred my severance and property division. I decided to use that money to travel around the US. I have absolutely no regrets. I later hear from Michael what happened next. Afterward, the two had a lavish wedding ceremony overseas. Naturally, both Michael and the employees were taken aback. And it seems no one attended the reception, but Stacy was quite pleased. I thought, I wish you all the happiness, Stacy. Now I am traveling on the Amtrak. I open a beer can in the daytime and enjoy my lunch. Ah. The best. The beer tastes amazing while looking at the beautiful scenery. A month later, Stacy suddenly contacted me. After touring Oregon and Nevada, I was enjoying scuba diving and barbecuing in California. Since the company had been on track, I had been diligently investing. So I had enough savings to enjoy my retirement. I wanted to continue enjoying life. So I hesitated about answering the phone but eventually decided to pick it up. Expecting to hear a sarcastic comment, I answered the call. However, Stacy's voice sounded depressed and she spoke seriously. Lately, Richard has been very irritable and seems like a completely different person. She asked if this was his original personality. Hearing this, I laughed. Then, I decided to share a secret about my husband. Didn't you know? Richard has early onset Alzheimer's. Yes, Richard suffers from early onset Alzheimer's disease, the most common type of dementia. Usually, it develops in older age and progresses slowly. However, there are rare cases where even younger individuals can develop Alzheimer's disease. I don't know the exact time it started. But he was diagnosed a year ago when his forgetfulness became noticeable. At the time of discovery, I was shocked and confused. It was just as we were planning to spend more time together. Richard was the most shocked and started crying when he got home. Sorry, Kathy. I've caused you nothing but trouble. Watching him in his agitated state was unbearable. The thought of forgetting you scares me to death. That night, we cried a lot together. It's okay, I'm fine. There's also the company to think about. Let's make sure we do what we can. Becoming weak from the illness is inevitable. But we have nearly 100 employees, and their livelihoods depend on us. We can't just abandon that. Reminded of this, Richard snapped back to his senses, showing a dependable face befitting a president. The progression of his disease had been gradual, and I had been supporting him. So the business was still running somewhat smoothly. To avoid chaos within the company, we kept this fact from everyone except a few experienced employees. And employing Michael in our company was also one of the hidden reasons. Ideally, I would have liked him to gain experience at another company for about 10 years as a form of training. Michael himself felt that being coddled by family would be detrimental. But with Richard's dementia, we no longer had that time. Up until now, we managed, but now it seems his personality is starting to change as well. The serious and kind Richard engaging in an affair is unbelievable. Likely, his judgment was impaired and Stacy took advantage of that. After years of hardship together, his illness nearly broke my heart. But we have a bond from overcoming challenges together. That's why I was prepared to stick with him through difficult times until Stacy took him from me. Despite Richard's illness, the feeling of betrayal was strong, and I left everything to Stacy. Having been Richard's right hand in the business, I made many management decisions. Now, as the disease progresses, Stacy will have to handle it. But she's inexperienced as a secretary and lacks the knowledge to make management decisions. But you're married, so you need to overcome this together. Shocked by this, Stacy became silent on the phone. When I reluctantly tried to speak to her, she suddenly started to scream. You tricked me, you old witch. What am I supposed to do now? After that, she just kept yelling no matter what I said, so I hung up the phone. I then blocked her number. Well, maybe I'll go diving again. Later, I heard through Michael about the developments. As his condition worsened, Richard no longer had the judgment to continue as president and had to resign. He retired, and Stacy took on his care. Stacy had resigned shortly after their marriage and had no income. Richard's assets were tied up in the business, and there wasn't much cash. Due to the property division I was paid, savings were minimal. Unaware of this, Stacy had been counting on more and ended up having a breakdown. She reluctantly started working part-time to make ends meet. She begged to be rehired, but knowing her past actions, the board unhesitatingly rejected her. Richard's dementia continued to progress, with wandering, eating inappropriate objects, and unhygienic behavior becoming more frequent. His personality changed drastically, and the gentle Richard the first knew was gone. Stacy's days became consumed by dealing with his behavior. When Michael happened to see Stacy, there was no trace of her former charm. Her hair was unkempt, she wore a tracksuit, and she was trying to take Richard, who was wandering, back home. At that moment, Richard said, "Kathy, where shall we go next?" "Let's go to the library again, Kathy." He didn't mention Stacy's name, repeating words like when we first met. "You can't divorce over a spouse's dementia." I want Stacy to continue standing by Richard as his wife, even if he only remembers the name of his ex-wife for life. Meanwhile, as my tour around the US was ending, the company asked me to return. Now that Richard and Stacy were out, I was to return as the president. Once, shortly after the divorce, I asked Michael how he felt. "It's sad, but there's no need for you to endure, Mom." Michael remembered the hardships of our early days when the business was struggling. But no matter how much we struggled together, an affair is unacceptable. Even if it was dementia, he must have had some judgment at that time. That's why, as a son, I can't forgive him for the betrayal. Michael was right. No matter the dementia, an affair is unforgivable. Especially since we divorced consensually when he still had some judgment left. Now, switching my mind, I'm focusing on preparing Michael to take over as president. One evening, as I was walking home from work, a figure approached me slowly from the opposite direction. It was unexpectedly Richard. It felt like too much of a twist of fate. Confused by his sudden appearance, he walked straight towards me and we met face to face. His appearance had changed drastically, wearing worn-out clothes and disheveled hair. He looked significantly aged. "You are a beautiful woman." "Oh, I'm sorry, that was sudden." Upon meeting, Richard spoke to me. But it seemed he didn't remember who I was, using a formal tone. I thought, he's completely forgotten me. "But you really are beautiful. You look a lot like my wife." Tears nearly came to my eyes at his words. Just as I was about to respond, Stacy interrupted. "Hey. Where have you been wandering off to?" Richard must have been wandering again. Stacy ran towards us. Sorry. My secretary is calling me." Saying this, he turned towards Stacy. But in the moment he turned, he quietly said, "I wish I could see Kathy." Stacy caught up and looked surprised for a moment but then glared at me and forcefully took his hand to lead him back home. I couldn't say anything and just watched them leave. "Goodbye, Richard." I started walking in a different direction, tucking away the memories of those times.